Well, hello, folks. I'm Joe Wesley again for our, and I say our because Lizzy will be on in just a few moments, our Thursday morning, 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight or Standard Time podcast for 15 minutes. For those of you who are seeing us for the first time, thank you for joining. Also, for those who are coming back. But for the first timers, the purpose of these Zooms, these podcasts, sorry for that brand name lapse, is to address the challenge that Lizzy presents to me. I'm a left brain kind of guy. I'm clear about Dr. Spock syndrome of Star Trek logic and reasoning and efforts. And she talks this yin and yang stuff about mindfulness and wellness. But what makes sense to me, what clicks with me, not quite makes sense, is the concept that I will be better as a human being if I learn some of this mindfulness stuff. So as we're talking, to see how that she cues in just right. I'm just introducing myself. Hi, Lizzy. How are you?
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, folks.
So I was just sharing my confusion again as a left brain kind of guy, and somehow my quest. I like to solve puzzles, and Lizzy and her philosophy, and she's well recognized in her industry, is a puzzle to me. So I'm asking questions I'm figuring she probably won't have an answer to, but she always does. So anyway, this quest goes on. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic, we're actually doing themes now per month. And we would ask for you to remember to subscribe, to share. And if you have themes you would like to suggest, learn more about, you have questions about, please feel free to leave us your comments. Yes? So today's topic is, I give examples, I start off. And the concept is setting boundaries. That's the theme for the month of February. And I have a question about, is it easier to say easier to say yes or easier to say no sometimes? Do people, I give examples. So one example is when my wife is asked by one of her friends or associates, would you bake me a cake? She says yes. She loves to do that because it's her passion, it's her pastime, her art. She is really good at it. Now, the other example of saying yes is she'll ask me sometimes, do I still look good in this dress from 20 years ago? What can I say but say yes? So
Smart man.
see, here we go. There we go. See the pressure on me? So the question is, are we saying yes or not avoiding saying no because we're pleased to say no, or we feel pressured to say yes, like smart husband syndrome? So let's see what Lizzy does with this.
Again, it very much depends on the circumstances. I think in the case that the first example of her baking a cake, if that's something that brings her joy and she enjoys that, that's a wonderful thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's your reason for saying yes? Are you saying, again, that's where it becomes, you need to get really clear. Are you saying yes because you feel like you're doing it out of the disease to please, or are you doing it out of, you're really wanting to do that because it feels good? Because again, when we give, it feels good. We always receive far more than we get when
Mm-hmm.
we give. But getting really clear, it's just, again, that's the whole theme this month, is getting really clear about what are your boundaries, what is it that you stand for, what is it that getting them really clean and clear so that you can focus on what brings you joy, again, as your guiding system, I believe. um, and not getting overwhelmed with all the things that, overcommitting, which a lot of people tend to do. I
I
mean, now
hear that, and
during this time,
that's
yeah,
to me that's a slippery slope. That you say setting boundaries, but when my wife asked me, "Do I still look good in this dress from 20 years ago?"
yes, yes.
Geez, that would it be? Yeah, yeah. Like I say, so I don't know if it's easier said than done. That's kind of my point here. So, are there any criteria or clues that one might use internally to kind of get some thermostat concept going?
Well, I think, again, self-awareness, and also being a little intuitive about, I mean, you're intuitive about what your wife needs to hear in that moment. If your wife came to you, or I know I have girlfriends that I know that they're going to be honest. And I will say, I want your honest opinion, because sometimes with clothing, we don't always see ourselves honestly. So we can ask those friends or our spouse for an honest answer. And
Mm-hmm.
then, their expectation is that you're going to give them one if they trust you, and you're one of their people. who will be that trusting, honest friend for them, or spouse. But if your intuition is that this is a person who just needs to hear a yes because they are unsure of themselves, and they need just to be kind of lifted up by you saying yes, you intuitively go that way. So again, it starts with self-awareness, and also really kind of putting yourself in the other person's shoes, also with your intuition. So developing that skill is really good.
Okay, you brought up actually a third point to me that I hadn't considered. She actually does things that make sense to me every now and then, folks. So we agree on the issue of saying yes because you're pleased to say yes. You enjoy what you do. It makes you feel even better for your appreciation of your art form and for the response of the recipient. I get that totally. A lot of altruistic efforts flow in that direction as one example. The other item might be a sense of, okay, it's important to that person, and you say yes, and maybe it's important to you or not, perhaps. But the third item that we have yet approached, that you're saying yes despite against your best interest. Again, it's an example. I'm laughing at myself. My wife, is a matter of habit, will ask me, do I look, she's going out in her work clothes, and do I look good? And what she's wearing, she's asking me. I says, well, yes. But I had the habit of looking at her feet also. And I said, your shoes aren't on yet, because she's wearing her slippers. I'm not talking about my feet. I'm talking about my dress. So I developed the habit of looking no lower than her kneecaps, because women watch you very carefully as a male before you make a response. So I'm feeling pretty, yeah, you look good, kneecaps up, it's tight. So she comes back to me that evening very upset because one of her coworkers said that your socks are of different color. And it was my fault because I didn't see it because I didn't look below her kneecaps. So, geez, what are we talking about here?
That's hilarious. You can't get it right, though. He's tough. He's tough. Um, but again, that's the case of she's blaming you when it really is not your fault. So you can take that blame, or you can let it go.
See, she's choked up about it. See how sincere, how I grab her sometimes. So, and the concept is, and maybe you nailed it in response, that do you say no sometimes to avoid being blamed, even though it's not your fault? And I guess the question is how does that mindfulness kick in to be aware of that difference?
I think that you don't take the blame unless, if blaming is never really a good way to go, blaming someone else. So I think, but if you're the one being blamed, you get to decide whether you're going to just say, all right, if what's easier for you to say, all right, or you're going to say, hang out whether, she walk in the room, you just go, I'm not going to take that. Like, this is not my fault. And you walk away into the other room to avoid, being a punching bag for somebody. So it kind of, it depends on the situation again.
I hear that, and it's a slippery slope. I get that, but you're the mindfulness lady. So the question is, again, it's one in hindsight to say it's been a detriment to me to not say no, because we're talking about setting boundaries here, and boundaries for your health. I'm assuming for your value. I'm assuming for your existence. I'm assuming. Now, if you've got 13 children, that could be a problem. As kids, as setting boundaries.
Yeah,
I get that, but on the other hand, how many times in life does one regret having yielded to not to saying yes instead of saying no? And if one has that awareness, that's I guess where the mindfulness things kicks in. Are there little techniques you can artfully say no and not be feel like you're being beaten? You have beat to
Go ahead. First, I'd say, how about some birth control?
Okay, fair enough.
That's a lot of kids.
Before the fact, that might work.
But and it is the case when you have so many kids. I have friends, and yet the parents are trying to be on the PTA for every kid, be on the coach for every team, and so. You can't do all those things. It's just you don't have anything left. You need to be able to fill yourself up to some level. So I always say to people, like, you got to carve out like some time, even if you have a lot of kids, you get up earlier, so you have a little time for yourself to do whatever it is, whether it's meditate or exercise or pray or go for a walk. But to really protect some of your own time, rather than just unraveling and just always being pulled and pulled and pulled in every direction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, it's hard sometimes, especially it's like with your kids, you want to be at everything, you want to be at every game,
Mm-hmm.
but so saying no to things you want to say yes to is even harder
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times. But if is it in your best interest for your health, for your energy, for your being able to show up and, do the things that you have to do in
Mm-hmm.
order to, achieve your personal goals, you got to be your first master first, mastering yourself. And
I hear that, and that kind of makes sense to me. It actually makes sense in all fairness. Are there little baby steps one can take? Because I'm back to this restart thing of light switch, or where you have to think mindfulness, you have to think awareness. Well, if I've never done it my entire life,
yeah,
how do I walk out of that fog that I'm in currently? Are there little baby steps one can take to kind of develop that sense?
I think pausing again, we talked about that with boundaries, pausing and asking yourself, checking in with your, like, how much, what's your obligation meter? Like, do you feel so obligated that you have to do this thing? Or do you feel like, it's, what are your assumptions about saying no? Do you feel like you're a bad person? Checking in with that, how
Mm-hmm.
you feel about yourself, right? Saying no, because we've been taught to be yes people a lot of people culture in our culture. And then practicing saying no to little things, with kindness, with transparency, being honest, practice it with first small things before you start, on the big things. But
Mm-hmm.
again, just saying, what, I'll get back to you on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it can work. And also, if you're gonna say yes to something, plan before your exit strategy, what time you want to leave by.
Exit strategy, I like that.
Because a lot of times we can be out with a friend and one drink goes to another, or watching TV, and we end up, watching a whole season. So being really clear about, like, all right, I'm going to stay out until 9 o'clock. I have to believe I just did that for plans I have Friday night. I said to my friend, I need to be home by 9. I could go out and I need to be home by 9 because I have to
Mm-hmm.
be up early Saturday for something. And she's like, we'll see, I'm like, no, I'm just letting you know. I need you to know that I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten really good at that. And I was not always good at that at all, at
Mm.
all.
I hear that.
Because I like to be in the moment. I like to go with the flow, but
Mm-hmm.
also I want to make sure that I conserve my energy for what I need to do the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets easier. It gets easier the more that you practice.
Well, it's interesting. We're talking about setting themes and topics, and what Lizzie and I do, we don't rehearse our current topic of the moment, but we do try to set an agenda of sorts over the month that we're now pulling things together. And you're talking about an exit strategy is one key phrase. You're talking about getting used to it as a key phrase concept. And I had just written down like 3 minutes ago, how do we avoid guilt by saying no? Maybe that'll be our next topic, or the little techniques and clues that one can
Yeah,
use.
exactly. There's the guilt but what I noticed is we put that on ourselves a lot of times rather than, sometimes it's put on us.
Well, let me say this differently. I'm going to say yes to that. I'm going to say no to that. I remember a girl I was dating. This is way before I met my wife, by the way,
Okay.
and that she wanted me to do something that I didn't want to do,
Mhm.
and it wasn't outrageous. I forgot the topic, but her comment to me was, "Well, if you loved me, you'd do this for me."
Mhm.
Now, at that time, as you may not believe this, but I used to be mouthy in my earlier lifestyle. But
Yeah.
having hard to imagine, right? But my response to her was, and the non-guilt side was, let's not get caught into a who loves who the most contest here. And she asked me, what do you mean by that? I says, well, you tell me if I loved you, I wouldn't deny this request to you. But you know how much I don't like this. So you loved me, you wouldn't have made the request.
Mhm.
So now we're in a contest to who loves who the most. And I really don't think we want to go there. So for my out, that was a comment, but I'm not sure if many people have the ability or skill to, they feel pressured to say, no, well, again, you're my wife, you're my spouse, you're my significant other, you're my kid, you're my parent, you're my best friend. How could you not do this for me? So maybe that might be a topic if
So no,
people
I
think
think
that.
again, asking yourself, like, how does it feel for you to like disappoint somebody? And but what is it? But really asking yourself, how does it feel to disappoint yourself? Is the
Hmm.
question to ask yourself. And with that example, it sounds very manipulative. How she handled that.
Well,
And
but isn't that always the case though? When I'm putting pressure on you to say yes and you're not in the mood to say yes, isn't that manipulation?
I mean, it can be, but it can also just be that the person genuinely wants you to be with them for this thing. They want you with them. They want to experience this thing with you.
I
Um,
would argue the want, but it's still I want something from you that perhaps you're not in the mood for it, and my want is greater than your want in this moment in my head.
yeah, I think again, you got to be true to yourself and
Mm-hmm.
respect your own boundaries. um, I just believe that that's the way to go, because otherwise you start resenting the person, and it's like you could lose yourself
That's
easily, and that's something that's a slippery slope in itself, that we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I got to make a note of this, and I like what you just said. It leads to resentment, but the resentment is not just of that other person, perhaps yourself also. And
Hmm.
perhaps mindfulness is becoming aware of that risk factor before you start making decisions about changing your method. Does that make sense?
Yeah, being really, really true to yourself. Yeah, I think mindfulness is just being true to yourself, and again, responding in the way that's best for you first, and then best for the others, like your oxygen mask on you first. So yeah, so again, just taking that pause, taking a moment to just say, I'll get back to you on that,
Mm-hmm.
and in this, just don't overcommitting yourself, because in these days, the boundaries are so blurred. We sleep with our phones, we go to
Mm.
take it to the bathroom with our,
Mm-hmm.
and so we need to create those boundaries just for our own, I believe, mental, emotional fitness and health. And yeah.
Folks, take that to the bank. Thank you very much, Lizzy. I've enjoyed this dialogue with you as always. And
Yes.
please leave your comments, your shares with us and your friends. And you can look at us on the reruns on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Remember to sign in to be seen, to leave comments.
Take good care, everyone.
So long.